What are we? What makes us what we are? And what we're going to be? I think it's that right there. It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. All you guys that were in here. It's our core foundation, man. Grit. And what does it mean? Really, in a nutshell, I think it means this. We'll go a little bit longer, we'll push a little harder, and we'll think a little deeper and a little sharper. To me, it means we'll play anywhere. We'll play on grass, we'll play in turf, we'll go to a fucking landfill.
Welcome back, sports fans. I am Johnny Gaz. Thank you for coming back for another video. Today we are focusing on free agent targets for the 2024 Detroit Lions. Just came off a video reviewing the 2023 season. So as we move forward, we talk about what is next for our beloved Motor City Kitties. And we move into free agent targets. So this will be a great topic today as we head into the offseason. Obviously, we have the Super Bowl still in front of us as I'm doing this video. But let's get into it. We did a video a little while back covering the free agents that will be up for the Detroit Lions here as we leave the season. So definitely go and check that out. There are some key free agents that we need to figure out if we're re-signing, if we're going to let go. I go through that in detail in that video, so definitely go give that a look. Today we're going to focus on kind of filling these holes. How do we build a champion, right? We have a fantastic foundation, right? You heard from Dan Campbell as we started this video. It all starts with that culture, the culture of grit, the type of guys that the Detroit Lions and that organization, Brad Holmes, the Ford family, Dan Campbell, they want to get the guys that fit this idea. And that's going to be the goal. That's going to be the theme of what I'm going to push here for these free agent targets. We're not going to look at necessarily dream scenarios or things that just can't happen. We're going to be realistic, and we're going to look at targets that can actually help the Lions and make sense for the team and for the organization. Now, the new league actually begins in March on the 13th at 4 p.m. So we have some time here as we head into the offseason and start the new league. The Lions will have an estimated $61 million in cap space. That's a lot of money. It is the seventh most of any NFL team entering the 2024 season. So they are in a very good position with a fantastic core, a great organization, great people looking ahead, and they have a lot of money to spend. Now, when all said and done, about $45.2 million of that 61 is really effective cap space. And what I mean by effective cap space is the cap space you have left after you sign all of those pending free agents that you already have on your team. So people you might bring back out of that group of free agents that we covered in that other video, some of that money is going to be allocated there. You're also going to have to sign all of the rookies that you get in from the draft this year, which we will have a future video on. This one's going to focus on free agents. We'll talk about draft potential targets in another video. But again, that $45.2 million in effective cap space is really what we have to play with as we talk about potential free agents here for the 2024 Detroit Lions. A couple things to think about before we move forward. There's always going to be a balance between who they bring in free agency and who they supplement with in the draft. So although my review today will cover all of the potential targets, all of the areas of need, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to fill these holes with all free agents, right? We know that Brad Holmes is a master drafter. Is that a weird way to say it? But that's what it is. This last draft, the pool of rookies that he brought in, Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, Jack Campbell, Brian Branch, the first four picks of the draft all had major impacts this season, all played a major role in the success of the team in the 2023 season. So we know Brad Holmes is fantastic when it comes to filling holes in the draft, finding gems, finding the right pieces to fit this scheme, fit the organization. So again, we're going to go through all of the options here at free agency, but we know that a lot of these holes will be filled in the draft. We want to keep that in mind. hopefully with this proven now success, with the year they had, they made an NFC Championship game. They were solid ending the year before. Dan Campbell is the coach, good structure and organization, great culture. You know, we're going to say that over and over again, but hopefully with all that now there and established, players will want to come to Detroit and look at this as a destination and maybe even be willing to take a little bit less money to find themselves in this right situation. So the Lions are in a really good spot. And I think, you know, as long as we keep all those things in mind, you know, we're putting ourselves in a good position as we head into this offseason. One other thing we want to think about before we move forward in this process for this video is, with all that cap space, with all the money that we think we have out in front of us, we want to be careful to think about the players we're going to have to sign. We have a core nucleus of stars and players that have earned money and will earn money as we move forward. We have a ton of rookies that in the future will have to pay. But what I'm thinking of right now and in the immediate future is, number one, Jared Goff. Right? We have to make a decision. The organization, the Detroit Lions, have to make a decision what they want to do with him. I think he's coming up in free agency after this year, where they could choose to either franchise tag him, obviously sign him, or let him walk. I think at this point he's proven himself as the Lions quarterback. He's taken them to places they have not gone in 30, 60 years. I won't answer that question right here and now, because I will have a video that will cover what to do with Jared Goff and how to move forward with him in detail. So be on the lookout for that in the very near future. But for this video and for the purpose of what we're talking about today, we just want to make sure we're thinking about allocating funds for him specifically. You also have to think about guys like Aiden Hutchinson. Obviously, we know that. Amon-Ra St. Brown. We talked about him in the last video when we reviewed the 2023 season. I mean, talk about a guy who's been consistent, available, a superstar now. So you're going to have to pay him. Last but not least, Penei Sewell. I mean, the cog of your offensive line, the heart of the team maybe, you're going to have to pay him. So the Lions are in a great position, but you want to continue that forward thinking by knowing you're going to have to pay those guys as we look at paying potential free agents into this year and beyond. So why don't we take a look at what I deem to be the Lions' biggest needs as we head into the offseason. Number one, absolute number one, in my opinion, more than anything else, defensive line or an edge rusher. We have to address the defensive line issue. To me, the defensive problems we had in the back end can be very much attributed to not getting to the quarterback in the front end, the defensive line, pressure up front. Getting to the quarterback up front. Pressures weren't necessarily the problem. Aiden Hutchinson is a pressure maniac, a pressure machine. The problem is, especially in the early part of the season, the midseason, he wasn't getting home. The defensive line doesn't get home in general. They don't have somebody on the opposite end of Aiden to take away the double team that he's absorbing in almost every play. They don't have a superstar nose tackle or defensive tackle to eat up offensive linemen. And so they weren't able to get sacks. They weren't able to consistently get to the quarterback. On top of that, I don't think the defensive line was athletic enough to handle more athletic quarterbacks, i.e. Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, even Geno Smith. You know, guys that just have enough athletic ability to scramble out of the pocket to make a play. The Lions weren't able to deal with that sort of thing. So to me, the number one need this year is defensive line and edge. Get some help for Hutchinson. The second biggest need, in my opinion, is a cornerback on defense. They need to find their true number one cover corner. Cam Sutton was a fantastic free agent pickup last year. They also picked up Emmanuel Moseley from the San Francisco 49ers, coming off of an ACL injury. We know what happened with that. We talked about that in the last video. They didn't get anything out of Emmanuel Moseley. So they had to rely on Cam Sutton as their number one corner all year long. The number two slot was up and down juggle act, okay? And I think their second biggest need by far is to find a number one corner, so that Cam Sutton can then be the number 2 and they can start to build depth behind. Kindle Vildor is not a number 2 cornerback, and they need to find the number 1 to then have everyone else fall back in line. The number 3 biggest need, I think, for the Lions heading into the offseason is offensive lineman, a guard, specifically to replace Jonah Jackson. It is my opinion that Jonah Jackson will not be paid by the Lions because he will demand such a high price. The Lions, I don't think they're going to want to pay him. They'll want to allocate those funds elsewhere, save that money for future contracts. So I think Jonah Jackson walks. They're going to have to find a guard to replace him. They already have Graham Glasgow at the other guard position, who was a replacement for Haloti Vaitai. If you remember, I think he's also walking. I think they're going to try and pay Glasgow, but you're still leaving an open hole on the other side if Jonah Jackson walks. So I think number 3 then will be his replacement at guard. Other positions of need I want to note here, I think you continue to build on your offensive line. I know I talked about a guard right now, but I think you also have to think about depth. Always need more depth. They had injuries up front, which caused problems in certain games. The Baltimore game, I think, is the biggest one. They got dominated up front by Baltimore. So they need to bolster up the depth on the offensive line. Think about the future in replacing Frank Ragnow. He is consistently suffering with injuries. Now, he is tough as nails, and he's playing through everything, but at some point that's going to stop. So they need to think about, again, continuing to bolster through the O-line, either through free agency or in the draft. Kicker is another one. I think we've talked about it in previous videos as well, and we know with Dan Campbell's aggressive style, on top of the fact that we think they've never trusted a kicker that's been on their roster the last few years, I think that's still a need. I also think with some pending free agents, with still some questions in that room, you're hoping Jamison Williams takes the next step forward, but you still got to make sure there's depth there and protect yourself from injury as well. So wide receiver to me is still in the mix. Teddy Bridgewater, we know, is retiring. And Hendon Hooker is waiting in the wings, right? He was the 3rd-round draft pick last year. But I think they have a question at backup quarterback. Past Jared Goff, if he goes down, we don't know if Hendon Hooker is ready. He's certainly a different style of quarterback than Jared Goff is. So do you want to find somebody to either bridge the gap or really be the true number 2 as you continue to develop Hendon Hooker? So let's talk about these actual targets. Let's get into them. And I'll try to go in order here based on the needs that I've just laid out for you here. So let's start off with the number 1 need, in my opinion, and that's a defensive line or edge rusher to help Aiden Hutchinson. Now, I talked about trying to be realistic with this, right? And trying not to just say, oh, the Lions should go get the best players available, and that's it. And I think when I looked at, and when you analyze the defensive linemen that are available, the edge rushes that are available, it's easy to get wrapped up in some of the big names. But you definitely have to take a step back and understand, yes, they have a lot of cap space, but they only have so much. They can't just throw money at people, and they want to think about the future. So I'm trying to be realistic with this as we talk about certain players. So what I'll start with is the big-time names at the top. Guys like Josh Allen, Danielle Hunter, Brian Burns, okay? These guys are going to demand big money. In a case like Josh Allen or in a case like Brian Burns, they're going to demand almost $30 million, okay, over a year, 2 years. And I don't know if that's the money that they're willing to pay. They know they're going to have to pay Aiden Hutchinson. So I don't know that they're going to overspend here. So a couple other recommendations, guys, I think that they should go after. Maybe more short-term solutions still. There's a guy like Leonard Floyd. Leonard Floyd from the Buffalo Bills. He's 32 years old. So he's a little long in the teeth, as they say. Is that the saying? But he's coming off a 10.5 sack season. So you talk about a guy who could bookend Aiden Hutchinson, wouldn't have to play every snap, but give the overall defensive line a bolster on the other end. I really believe that would be good. Now Leonard Floyd would probably demand 2 years, about $16.2 million. Give or take. Now, the numbers that I'm coming up with today, just so everybody is aware, Spot Track, mostly from Spot Track, as well as Over the Cap. So I'm verifying these numbers in a couple different sources. Certainly, I don't want to make anyone think that I'm some deep down insider and know the exact number that these guys will get or are projected to get, but I try to come close as possible. So in this case, for Josh Allen, for Leonard Floyd, we're potentially looking at about 2 years, $16.2 million. Another big name in the mix, defensive end. We're talking defensive lineman, potential targets for the Detroit Lions as we enter the 2024 season. Big name, Fletcher Cox. Another guy that's closing in on the end of his career. Fletcher Cox is 33 years old, been with the Eagles now for a while. Talk about a guy that would sit in the middle of our defensive line, eat up offensive linemen, and allow guys on the edge to really get at the quarterback. I think this would be a fantastic one-year deal kind of thing. I really do. Unfortunately, it looks like he's being linked to the Browns already in the Jim Schwartz defense, so I don't know that the Lions will even get an opportunity at Fletcher Cox, but I definitely wanted to bring him up in case Brad Holmes can work some magic here. So our number 2 need, we talked about cornerback. We need to find a true number 1. Now, the name I'm about to give you, I think, probably might be one of the most prized free agents out there this year, or as we enter the 2024 offseason. I don't know if the Lions will honestly make a move for this player because he's within the division, number 1. I think he's going to demand a lot of money. I don't know if his team is going to allow him to walk away, right? That's always a possibility in these scenarios as the team re-signs these guys. But if we're talking about a number 1 cornerback, a true number 1 cornerback, I would say the biggest name is Jalen Johnson. Jalen Johnson, 100%. Chicago Bears, 24 years old, entering the prime of his career. A true number 1 corner, would really set our room up of corners to the point where I think now you really have it as a strength. I mean, they were trying to build that last year with free agents. It didn't work out. But this is going to be huge money. I mean, this is a guy that's going to demand $17 million a year, give or take. He had 4 interceptions last year. He locks down most times. I mean, this is a fantastic cornerback. But again, we have some obstacles to jump through, the money in division. So we'll see. So I wanted to come up with other options because I don't know how realistic truly this is. So to give you a name maybe you're not familiar with, maybe you are. But again, more of a realistic scenario, I think, for the Lions based on the money that I think they'll be willing to spend and the type of player they're trying to get. Chidobe Awuzie from the Cincinnati Bengals. A little older, 28 years old. Another good physical corner. A guy I think the Lions could fit in very well. Money-wise, I think it makes much more sense. He's closer to $11.5 million over 2 years, maybe. Again, according to Spot Track and over the cap. Again, I think it'd be wise for the Lions to make a move at corner in free agency and even as well in the draft. I really think they need to add to this room. If they go with a guy here like Awuzie, I think they definitely need to get something in the draft, build some young talent behind them. But it would be a great step towards locking down those 2 cornerback spots. Another big name out there, going to be playing in the Super Bowl this weekend, L'Jarius Sneed. Probably, again, another unrealistic expectation for the Lions. This is a $17.5 million a year player. I don't think the Lions are going that direction, but I want to bring him up because he's going to be available. He's going to demand big money, and I think a lot of teams are going to be after him. If Brad Holmes could work some serious magic, they're willing to put big money into one move, maybe that's it. A couple other little names I want to mention. Little names, big-time players, but maybe not in the mix as much as these other guys. Stephon Gilmore, 33 years old, Dallas Cowboys. There is a connection to the Lions in the fact that his brother Stephen Gilmore, who didn't play much but is in the cornerback room on the practice squad and was brought up later in the season, that could be a potential one-year deal. Again, is he a true number one and a long-term option? No, but I think it bolsters the room and gives you two good options at cornerback instead of one. Kendall Fuller for the Commanders, again, going to demand a lot of money. He's looking more of a multi-year deal, $42 million over the course of 3 years, maybe a $14 million a year player. A little less than Jalen Johnson and L'Jarius Sneed, but again, do the Lions want to go that high? It'd be good talent. So another name to think about. Our third area of need, guard, replacing Jonah Jackson. Got to look at offensive linemen. If Jonah Jackson's going to walk, we have to replace him. So I do have a few options for you here. A couple names you may have heard of, a few maybe you haven't heard of. Offensive linemen, maybe not as sexy, as far as names. The one I kept coming about, though, is Dalton Risner. Okay, Dalton Risner, who would be coming from Minnesota. Again, that's in the division, so that's always a little bit hairy. But again, free agent. There's the big man, Dalton Risner, 28 years old. He'd be looking for a 3-year deal, $24 million. That's almost $8 million a year. But it'd be a great replacement for Jonah Jackson. I don't think we'd step back too much in this case. He's a year younger than Jonah Jackson. So, again, you're not plugging a hole with an older player. And the money seems to make sense. So, again, another position where you may look at someone in free agency at a lower price and then continue to bolster with the draft. Another name, Ezra Cleveland. Now, this one I had to do a lot of research on. I couldn't even find a picture of him playing for the Jaguars this year, so this is the most recent picture I could find. Again, sure we could find something in the archive somewhere, but this is Ezra Cleveland. He is only 25 years old. He played for the Jaguars this past season. He's going to be a little bit more pricey, probably in the 9.5 a year range. But again, another good guard, a younger guard, somebody you can build with, and could be a really good option. A couple other names there in the guard field. John Simpson, 26 years old from Baltimore, or Damian Lewis out of Seattle. But again, I think it's just going to be very important that they don't allow injuries, don't allow things to happen on the offensive line that prevent this from being their strength. Their offensive line is the reason why the offense is becoming elite, the reason why they're able to run the ball the way they do, work to play action off of the run game, is all because of this offensive line. So they have to continue to add talent either through free agency or the draft. And I gave you a few ways that they could do it here. A couple other targets I want to mention. I think the Lions should look at. Now, we mentioned a couple other positions of need. Just talked about the O-line. Kicker, again, Michael Badgley. He's a free agent going into this season. I don't think the Lions are going to bring him back. I think the only reason they do bring him back is if they don't find somebody they're happy with. So here's a couple options that they could look at. Greg the Leg. Greg Zuerlein would be one option from the Jets. Kicked for the Jets last year. Big time leg. They don't call him the leg for a reason. A guy that I think they could trust more than what they had last year. Is it a long-term solution? No. But I think they would head into the season much more confident in their kicking situation if Greg Zuerlein was their kicker. Will Lutz is another name that's available. And somebody who kicked in the playoffs this year for the Houston Texans. I think it's Kaimi Fairbairn. I think that's how you say it. Kaimi Fairbairn. But talk about bringing in a guy that actually now has some playoff experience. So again, building trust in your kicker. Not sure we're going to sign Badgley. This could be an option. This could be an option. So that's going to do it for today's video. I think the most important thing is that we continue to keep our eyes on the future, making sure the Detroit Lions look ahead to who has to be paid, when and why. Jared Goff, again, is at the beginning of that list. I mentioned the players that we have to pay: Amon-Ra St. Brown, Aiden Hutchinson, Penei Sewell. These are the staples of your organization, the pillars that you have to build around and build upon. And that's the foundation. Free agency is pieces, right? Finding the right pieces, the right guys that'll fit your culture, that will fit that attitude, that grit that Dan Campbell talked about at the beginning of this video. I think they will do that. I think Brad Holmes, I think the organization has proven that they're heading in the right direction, and they will continue to do that with free agents. So again, be on the lookout for our coverage of draft prospects. That'll be coming up very soon, as well as full coverage of what the Lions should do with Jared Goff. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, talking about upcoming free agents. I think it's going to be a fantastic season for the Lions. Cannot wait to see what they do here. Thank you for visiting Johnny Gas Sports today. We will see you on the next one.